We're basically, Live of the Bike is facing a lawsuit. This is a huge issue. I'm really sad to hear. I thought, Joe Ingram and I were cool, but he's suing Live of the Bike for calling Limit Hold'em the great game of Limit Hold'em. So, I thought we were cool, but I guess not. So we're changing the name to the classic game of Limit Hold'em, and Joey can have the great game of Limit Hold'em back. So,
Makes sense.
yeah. Shout out to Poker Saja for winning a Pot Limit Omaha tournament. And we're going to go over our scariest moments in poker. So this is Mike Yoshino, a good buddy of mine. Used to play high stakes so high that I can't even see over.
Back in the days.
Back in the day, both of us. But, we move on. We multitask, multi-jobs.
Yes.
So the first scariest moment I had was the very first time I played poker for money. I was in Luxor in Las Vegas. I was playing 1 to 5 spread limit stud.
Wow.
Yeah, and I crushed it. I won $220. I thought I was like the man. I was like, in college, I was like, oh my God, $220. This is sick.
Man, I remember my first scary moment was also when I was in Vegas, because I had played, I was just learning how to play poker, and I was playing 4-8 limit in LA. And then I had gone out to Vegas, and I tried one of the casinos out, and I was like, oh, let me sit down at this 4-8 table. And then all of a sudden, somebody won 2 pots in a row. And then it became a full kill pot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, they just doubled the stakes. I had no idea.
A third blind? Yeah.
Yeah, and a third blind, and I had no idea.
That must be really scary.
Yeah, what was I getting myself into?
You're not rolled for that, right?
No.
It halves your roll.
Yeah. Playing 4-8, all of a sudden playing 8-16 limit hold'em.
Yeah. Then I started from the bottom, like 3-6 limit hold'em in San Diego back with Marijo and stuff, and we made all the way to like 100 or 200 limit hold'em. So I was like,
wow.
All pumped and ready. I think it was at Bellagio where I first. And this was one of the experiences that wrecked me because I had worked my way up from whatever, like 3-6 and 4-8, the A16, 24, then 40-80, and then orange. So in my first orbit, I picked up kings under the gun. It was like raise. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to freaking like just run this up so hard.
Yeah.
And I got 3-bet. And I'm like, all right, 4-bet. And then he called, and then it's an ace-high flop, obviously. He has ace-queen, and I just like pay off. I'm like,
man.
I just lost like, 2 stacks, and then ended up doing poorly and getting shot back down, but that was just like, my heart was just like, I was like, such a high at kings, and then, just, low down.
Oh, yeah. No, I know how that goes.
Yeah. So then in No Limit, like one of the scarier times, I wasn't really scared of the stakes because it was just 10-20 No Limit, but the scariest time was against like Antonio Sfindiari and Phil Locke. Like this was at Bellagio. I'd played with him in Commerce Bellagio. And Bellagio, they were buying in like 20K. This was with Yuban Tao, our buddy.
Oh, yeah. I remember him.
Yeah, and they were basically just vacuuming, the entire table, like basically being the bank. Like you can play whatever hand, and it doesn't matter. It's just like they'll just like stack you and take it all.
Yeah.
So, for those of you who haven't played with Antonio Sfindiari, he's kind of like a cat playing with a mouse with you. So like if you like make a move, he'll just like sit there, like shuffle his chips, and just like eye you, and just like. Oh my God, he could just like see right through my soul. This is like super scary.
Yeah.
I haven't played with him in a long time, but back then I wasn't as experienced of a poker player, no limit hold'em player. So yeah, it's safe to say he crushed us. But
yes.
Yeah, he was just far more experienced back then. But that was the scariest moment. So what about you?
I see. Probably playing my WPT final table. I mean, I'd never played for that high stakes before because there was several, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line with each place finishing. And I was at the final table with Phil Ivey, and I had seen him on TV, and I actually got to see how good he plays live.
Yeah.
And that was, that was a really that was quite an experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna analyze one of the hands that you played with Phil Ivey on the WPT. You had several others, and there were several off camera. I think you told me as well, like a long time ago.
Yeah.
But basically, we're gonna analyze that, and there's a little bluff rebluff action going on. I'm not gonna say who's the idiot who tried to bluff Phil Ivey, but
Right.
but afterwards you said that you know how to fix the bluff, like you would be able to bluff him out if you just like did it better.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
so we'll get to that in a bit. But basically, yeah. So also Andrew Nemi and Brad Owen at the Mirage for the meetup game. Andrew Nemi also mentioned that Antonio Svendiari was or is one of his favorite TV players,
Hmm.
and it's like I agree. It's like what I really like about Antonio Svendiari and Phil Locke is like I play with them in person and see them on camera, and they're one of those
Yeah.
guys. They're like super nice guys. They're like entertaining on camera, but
Hmm.
they're cool at the normal tables too, because some people or on camera they like play a persona or whatever, and they're not necessarily who they seem when you play with them or meet them in real life. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
So those two guys, high quality poker TV players.
Yes.
So yeah, another time it was kind of funny. It was like I was in a whatever three-way pot, and I hit like Phil Lock raised. I think I defended with like ace deuce of clubs or something, and like it was three ways, and I flopped an ace, and I just like check called,
Uh-huh.
and then he check on the turn, so I know he doesn't have an ace.
Uh-huh.
And on the river, I bet one chip, one $10 chip,
Oh
and then
yeah.
he's like, holy cow, he's like, and he was just like spreading the pot, and he was like, oh my god, this like a lot of tanks of gas. Like I don't think I could call, and he shows king queen high, so he ended up not calling, but it was just
Wow.
it's like Phil Lock is so it's just hilarious.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so a couple other times, one time I know you have online stories too, but one time I was in Hollywood Poker when I was in like doing well. I was playing heads up against this guy.
Hmm.
I think 10-20 or 20-40. Anyway, he was better than me, and he was just like wrecking me. But I was on tilt, and I was just like rebuying, and I finally made a score. I picked up aces,
Uh-huh.
like heads up. So I was like raise. He like 3-bet. I 4-bet. He 5-bet.
Wow.
I'm just like, well, I know if I 6-bet, it's like it's like literally giving away. I have aces, and he might even fold kings,
Oh wow.
or whatever. Anyway, we were like pretty deep. We both had like I know the final pot was 24K, so I probably had 12K, and he probably had me covered.
I see.
I was just like rebuying in like 2K time every time I got stacked.
Right.
So then the flop, he 5 bits, and then the flop is the flop is 8-8-3. I
Hmm.
remember that. And then he just like pot bets. I'm just like call.
Hmm.
Turns a 4, so it's 8-8-3-4.
Yeah.
And he like bets pot. I'm like, all right, okay, call. And the river's a 10.
Yeah.
He's just like all in. I'm like, oh my god, does he have tens? Does he have quads? So obviously I'm not folding.
Yeah.
I'm like, I hold the point was the setup for the situation, and I call, and he had 10-9.
Wow.
So because he was just like trying to blow me off the whole way.
Yeah.
So like I play like a couple more hand, just like whatever, folding the blinds a little bit. I'm like, and I type in the chat, I'm like, dude, you're so much better than me. Like, I can't believe I got my money back. I have to quit you. Like, I'm sorry. He's like, I understand,
Oh,
So if you're
wow.
out there, I'm like, thank you for being understanding, blah, blah, blah. But whatever. I mean, it just like, I knew he was better than me. So I was like, and I got my money back. I just lucked out. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't appreciate, like, when you get lucky in your certain things. Like, when got on the WPT and final table with Phil Ivey, you must have ran pretty good. I'm sure you played well too, but
Oh, absolutely. I
yeah.
mean, it's not easy. I mean, there at one point in the tournament, I was on the verge of getting knocked out. I had literally less than 10 big blinds left,
Yeah.
and I just,
You have to win, right? You can't.
yeah, doubled up, and
Yeah.
then I had chips to play with, and I was able to play some poker. And it was a grind. I mean, and anybody can get to the final table, and but it's not easy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Mhm.
Like the most recent time I've been scared. It's not even I was scared, but it was
Mhm.
just like scared of how uh big of a deficit I would have playing Doug Polk heads up.
Oh
Because
yeah.
like yeah, I mean he like in his prime he was in his best,
Mhm.
and like I'm known to play heads up, but I'm not like whatever elite tier.
Yeah.
So I was like, I wonder how many theoretical dollars I'm losing BB per 100.
Right.
So that was just like in my head, I'm like, this is probably pretty scary loss rate. But,
Yes.
and I played Garrett, like, we both played with Garrett at Commerce, but at that
Mhm.
time, it just like, he's scary, but it's like, I'm playing 100 big blinds, so it's not a big deal. Like I don't remember. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was just like we were probably at like high proficiency, so it's like yeah, I mean he's super good, but it's not like back in 2005 when you're facing Ivy, I'm facing Antonio Spindiari, and we're just like oh my god, it's like
Yeah.
it's just a different kind of thing,
It
different
is.
kind of feel.
Yeah.
So you have any other times you were like super terrified or?
Uh, I mean, not particularly terrified, but anytime I jumped stakes,
Yeah.
when I was playing high stakes for, you know, especially when I jump stakes, I have to basically double the buy-in, because the blinds are double, so everything just gets magnified. So,
Yeah, what
uh,
people
uh,
make mistakes is like just because you jump stakes doesn't mean your win rate stays the same. Like
right,
you're tougher opponents usually, and then just your win rate's going to go down. Maybe you can't even cut it. Like
right, exactly. And it's not easy. I mean, definitely not easy jumping stakes. It can be intimidating at times,
yeah,
depending on the competition that you're playing against.
yeah,
So, I always had to go in, kind of feel out the competition first, and then
right,
make my moves accordingly.
yeah. And you've played bigger than me in No Limit. You've played up to 200, 400, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest I've played. I played that only a couple times. But
Still,
doesn't. It wasn't a game that went often.
right.
Back then, 100, 200 would go, 50, 100, and the 2040 no limit would go every single day. But those other games that were the bigger games, it's just whoever's in town, and it has to be the right combination of people to actually start those bigger games.
Yeah, back then in the heyday, there were like 6 to 7, 10, 20 tables going around the clock. I don't know about
Absolutely.
2040. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, 2040, there's one or two games at least.
Yeah, it was
And
crazy. Nowadays, like the landscape's just like much more dry.
hmm
Games are tougher. Actually, in I think during the heyday too,
hmm
limit stakes were actually bigger. Like stud would be like 1 or 200, 200, 400, and limit hold'em.
Right.
I only played up to 4,800, but I've
Uh-huh.
heard of stories like they would play 1,000, 2,000 limit hold'em, which is just like massive, right? So
That's like Bobby's Room,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
that type of thing. I mean,
and it's like we see this stuff like high stakes poker and TV or live at the bike. The Friday games are like massive, but it's like these games don't really run. It's only like special occasions, like invite and like special VIPs, and then everyone just comes in
absolutely.
and something's like if you get like poker works opposite in other industries. Like the better you get, nobody wants to play with you.
Yes.
So like other industries, like the better and more proficient you are, people want to work with you. But
Absolutely.
like poker, you get to a threshold where you're like at a certain level and you get locked out of games unless you're like in certain social cliques.
Right.
So that's something that the audience may not know. Where it's like, oh, like say Garrett, Andy, Brian, Kim, are Papazian are like killing these games. Like, okay, well, there's a social aspect too.
Yeah, there is.
So yeah, just like I've been locked out of games. Like I don't get the text, I don't get the phone calls. You were probably the same for like certain. Oh, I remember. I
Absolutely.
definitely remember some cases you were locked out for sure.
Yes.
We won't mention any names, but yeah, I mean that's basically it. And just like we have an interview with you, which we pre-recorded because we weren't sure if you were going to show up today.
Right.
So yeah, we'll have that interview, and then we're going to analyze a pot limit on my hand you did with Enston, who's asking when the call-ins are, and then we're going to have the IV bit, and then yeah, we're going to do those. If you have anything to add,
No, I
or
mean,
all right, well then let's get on to your interview. So here we have Mike Yoshino. He was a high stakes pro. He was on a couple episodes of Live at the Bike. He also did a final table with Phil Ivey in the WPT, and we're going to analyze that hand. And somehow this genius thought he could bluff out Phil Ivey, but no spoilers on what happens. But Mike's here, and he's going to tell us his poker story. So we want to go ahead.
yeah, so basically I started playing all different kinds of card games before leading up to poker. For example, Magic the Gathering, Big Two, the 13 card Chinese poker, and a bunch of other card games. And then when I turned 21, I asked my friends, so what do they play in the casinos? And they told me this game called Texas Hold'em. So I thought, what's that? And then they taught me the basic rules of Texas Hold'em. Went into the casino, played some 2-4 limit Hold'em,
Shout out to Lemon Home.
and then I realized, wow, I need to maybe study up on this poker game. So I bought one of my first books was Hold'em for Advanced Players by David Skolansky, and that was a really good book because it taught me some great basic hand strategies and hand rankings, and it gave me a good, nice, solid foundation on how to play poker. So from there, I kept playing Limit Hold'em because that was the most popular game back then. There were literally no limit tables. And then in 2003, actually, I was in the Marines, so I actually got deployed to Kuwait and Iraq. And during that time I was deployed, actually, when I had some free time, I would start reading some poker books here and there. And then after I came back, I hadn't played poker for a good, 7-8 months or so. And after I came back, I started playing poker again. I looked around and I see all these no limit tables, and I still saw limit hold'em tables, but this whole no limit game was completely new to me. And I was
Yeah, Moneymaker won the World Series in 2003. It's like no limit just blew up.
oh that was the year that Moneymaker won. It was
Right.
2003. So that's what exploded no limit hold'em. And when I got back, I saw these tables. There were $100 buy-in, $200 buy-ins, and I was thinking, wow, you could win or lose that much in one single hand?
And now it's the big blind, right?
Right. So I thought, oh, this is crazy. So I thought, I was a little bit nervous, but I thought, you know what, I want to take a shot at this $100 buy-in game.
The rest is history.
Yeah. So I bought in for that $100 buy-in and just saw how people played, and I thought,
You're better than them.
I could beat the game. I could
Right.
definitely beat the game. So I grinded it up from the $100 buy-in, the $200 buy-in, and then actually they had the 2-5 no limit game. There was no jump back then. They didn't have 5-10 no limit or a 5-5 no limit.
Yeah, it was a 3-5 $200 max.
Right.
Yeah.
And then from there, I actually thought I had to take my game to the next level. So I went straight from there to 10-20 no limit.
Oh yeah. Hashtag
And-
normal.
Yeah. And actually, it worked out good because
Yeah, we did well back then.
yeah, the players weren't necessarily any better. They just had more money.
Right.
And actually, what inspired me to jump from that game, the small game, to the big game was there was a person who sat down at my table who said he was waiting for the 10-20 loan limit. And we were having a conversation, and he said, oh, I'm a professional poker player. And I was like,
You're like, really?
I thought I thought he was maybe joking, and I was talking to him, and no, he was actually serious. He was a
Yeah.
professional poker player,
Yeah.
and he considered himself one of the better players. So I thought, okay, well, if he plays like this, then I could definitely beat him.
Right.
So then
That's
I
how it all starts.
jumped over to 10-20. I thought, this is a gold mine, basically.
Right.
So from there, I just stuck with the high stakes, and I jumped up from 10-20 to 20-40, and then the following year in 2004, I actually played a WPT event up in Reno,
Right.
and I actually made the final table. Going into the final day, I was the chip leader, and I was playing against Phil Ivey along with a few other players. And yeah, that was a really great experience playing with Phil Ivey back in my early days of poker.
Yeah, we're gonna analyze one hand you did with Phil Ivey, and then you had several hands, but we're gonna get those on a different day. And you finished your highest main event finish in the World Series.
My highest main event finish was 250 first place.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then when you were playing a high stakes, like what other name players?
Oh wow! I got to play with Moneymaker, which was pretty
never
cool
played,
actually. When I first started playing with all these people I saw on TV,
Right.
and I see them live. Maria Ho played high stakes.
Jackson Rijo.
Yeah, Jean-Robert Ballon played. Joe Hashem, Greg Raymer, Jamie Gold. I've actually had the opportunity to play with most of those main event winners because after the main event they played high stakes poker and I played some high stakes poker too. So eventually we crossed paths and played a few games here and there.
Yeah, so like I remember, well, the games went up to like 1 or 2, and you played like 200, 402, no limit a couple times.
Yeah, a couple of times I played 200, 400, no limit. Most of the time it was 100, 200, maybe 50, 100, and then during the like a regular weekday, it'd be like 20, 40, no limit. For
Right,
example.
right, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a pleasure to watch all the stuff on the Friday games, the big stakes games, because they don't run as regularly as the TV would imply. So then you moved to Florida.
oh yeah, I moved to Florida right when they legalized or they increased the stakes because before in Florida the max buy-in for any poker game was $100 buy-in, and they people were telling me these stories where they played 5-10 no limit and it was $100 buy-in. I'm like, how can you play 5-10 no limit with $100 buy-in? It's just you buy in all in.
Yeah, 10 big blinds.
Yeah. So then, as soon as they increased the stakes, people were playing 5-10, 10-20, like 25-50, a lot of 25-50, and I had the opportunity to play with a few players that were really wealthy businessmen that were just actually learning how to play, and they were just jumping into these big high stakes no limit games, and they were still trying to figure out hand selections and like does a full house beat a flush or what beats what. So
well,
those were good games.
Those are some good times.
Yes.
So then, you moved to Florida, and then you moved back to California. So.
I did move back to California. The games in Florida did dry up a little bit, and then also on top of that, most of my friends that I grew up with and a lot of contacts I know, they all live in California.
Yeah.
So it's a more familiar place for me to just come back to LA.
Yep.
I still love Florida and I still visit there, and
Florida.
Yeah, it's a great state to be.
So now you're working on some e-commerce stuff and wholesale distributions.
Oh yeah, I am now. I'm I might play poker here and there for fun, but now I'm trying to work on e-commerce. And by the way, if anyone knows any wholesale distributors, that'd be great because
contact them, Yoshi Poker on Instagram. Yeah, poker's never going to leave us. Like, we're very lucky we were in that era and, did well. And poker is still part of what we do, but now we kind of, do a lot of different projects. And, yeah, that's it. So you played with two really big names in poker. One's Phil Ivey and the other one's Dan Bilzerian.
yes.
So what was it like to play with Phil Ivey in the WPT? Because we saw him, on TV, and we're like, oh man, it's Phil Ivey, it's the GOAT, right?
Yeah. Oh no, when I was playing with him off camera before the final table, I mean he I could tell he was the best player at the table. I mean he really knew what he was doing. I mean that was one of those players where I was like, man, I don't want to
Mess with him.
get too mixed up with him. I'd rather try to pick on other players because, I mean, he's a very, very tough player to play against, and then he's not giving his money away at all.
Right.
And you mentioned Dan Bilzerian.
Yeah.
He's a great player too. I mean, I played with him mostly in the high stakes games, and he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's very good at mixing up his game and trapping his opponents and kind of throwing them off their game.
Yeah, he was just controversial because not many people have, seen him play, and then he became an Instagram superstar. But yeah, I mean, Ryan Fee said he plays decent too, and he played with him, so vouch for him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what's your future in poker? So.
My future in poker now is I'll still play casually here and there. I mean, it's just a fun game to play, but I like to focus on other business and other ventures, so I can just, I don't want to have to rely on only one source of income or just playing poker.
That's basically what a lot of us kind of figure. It's like you don't want to put all your eggs in the basket, especially since now the landscape of poker is really dried up. It's like we have an opportunity for a good spot, probably take it, but it's just a different era. So, do you have any no limit tips, especially since you see these guys play on camera? You see the guys in chat that aspire to be those guys that play on camera or professional grinders. Any words for them?
Well, I would say, always try to improve your craft. I mean, if your passion is playing poker, then just continually try to improve and like make the game yours, and just play it as a game, as a fun game, because the landscape of poker is constantly changing. So, new information is going out there. So you have to keep up with how people are playing and how you're playing against them. So I would say just take notes on how you play and improve your craft.
Sounds good.